Alright, so last week in stats we did some data collection and analysis. So you're going to want to open up this CSV file. I'm using something called LibreOffice. It's free. You can use pretty much anything though, and it's going to look the same, any spreadsheet program. The first thing I wanted you to do here was calculate the sum of wheelbases. So you can see we collected data on two variables here. We've got a color variable and the wheelbase. And this first thing I wanted you to find was the sum of the wheelbases. So what we're going to do, we're going to put it in this cell right here. This is D2, and I click on that and I hit equal sign first. And I'm going to ask the spreadsheet to find the sum of this column of data. So I hold shift and click on the bottom, and now I've selected that whole column of numbers there. It says B2 to B66. It's going to find the sum of all of those. In other words, it gives me the answer when you add them all up. Okay, now to find the mean of the wheelbases, if you don't remember what mean is, let's take a look at the equation right here. I've got the mean, or x bar, is equal to the sum of a whole bunch of points divided by the number of things that I added up. Okay, so this is just the average that you're familiar with. This may be some new notation. This sigma right here is the same as typing sum in our spreadsheet. Okay, I'm summing from B2 to B66. Right here I'm summing over all of the x's. Okay, so I've already got the sum there. Now I need to divide by the number of things that I added. So what I'm going to do is in this cell, I'm going to say equal to, and I'm going to reference this thing right here. This is D2. So I'm going to say D2 divided by count. Now this is a new function, and it's going to count the number of things that I have selected here. Now this function count doesn't care that it's 58, 60, 68. What count does is it's going to go through and say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. things there. So I've got the sum divided by the count. That's my mean of the wheelbases. And just looking at these numbers over here, 60.838 kind of makes sense. Okay, so moving on here to the square difference from mean. And I asked you to do a full column right here. And what that means is, if we go back and look at the equation for standard deviation, okay, this is the one we went over in class. This right here, oops, that should have been a little bit different. This doesn't make a huge difference really, but I'm going to just say sub I. Okay. Now what this is we're going to take the sum of a whole bunch of things that look like this. Okay, so the column that I want you to make, the mean squared difference, or rather the square difference from the mean, is going to look like so. I'm going to take this x sub I, I'm going to reference it, it's B2. I'm going to say this is equal to B2 minus, and I want to subtract the mean, right? That's what my equation says. One of those numbers, subtract the mean. So the mean right here is E2. Okay, and to square something, I'm going to do caret 2 to the second power, like so. Okay, so what I did just now is for this value and this mean, I calculated the square difference from the mean. Just this piece. Now I'm going to make a column of a whole bunch of those, and the way you do that is by stretching this down, but there's going to be a little problem, okay? You see these numbers, they look nothing like this number 8. And the reason that happened, if you see right here, I'm referencing E2. When I come down here, it's looking at E3. I don't want it to do it that way. Okay? So what I'm going to do instead of referencing E2, I'm actually going to type the number in there so that it's a constant value. And 60.838 is going to give me enough. Okay, and then I square it, and there we go. Now if I drag this all the way down, okay, it's taking these numbers over here say for this cell, for example, it takes the number in B52, subtracts the mean, and then squares it. So it did the work for me. I'm going to keep pulling this down until I get to the bottom of my data set. Okay, now I've got this column representing the square difference from the mean. Okay, so now to do the standard deviation of the wheelbases, let me come back and look at this formula again. Here's my standard deviation of the wheelbases. I need to sum all of those things that I just made in my spreadsheet. Then I need to divide by the number of them, and then I need to take the square root of that. Okay, so here's what that looks like. I'm going to sum, got to start with equals, sum of all of those guys. Okay, I've got to divide by n, or the number of things. I'm going to count. Now I already see what I just used to select them, so I'm going to just type it in instead of point and click. G2 to G66. Okay, and there's that, but I forgot one thing. I need to take the square root of that whole mess. So if I come out here and type SQRT parentheses, now I'm going to add parentheses at the end too, I've got my standard deviation, and that's the number that you should end up with as well. Okay, I hope this helps.